Word count is one of those questions that seems simple until you start looking into it. Then it gets complicated fast. Let me give you the practical answer to how long your novel should be. The short version. It depends on genre, and for most types of fiction, your target should sit somewhere between 60 and 90,000 words. Here's why that range and what the exceptions are. So publishers and agents, if you're going the traditional route, have expectations about the length that are tied to genre. These aren't arbitrary, they're based on what readers expect, what fits the format and what's commercially viable. Submit something wildly outside the expected range and it's a red flag. Too short suggests an underdeveloped story, too long suggests a writer who can't edit. For general commercial fiction, thrillers, crime, contemporary, romance, the standard range is sort of 70 to 100,000 words, 60 to 90. Aim for the middle of that and you're in safe territory. Literary fiction has a bit more latitude at the upper end, 80 to 100,000 is typical. Some literary novels run longer, but if you're writing your first novel, chasing length is not an ambition worth having. It just means more to fix in revision. Fantasy and science fiction can run long. 100,000 words and beyond is common in epic fantasy because the world building and scope demands it. But for a first novel, staying closer to 90,000 is sensible. You can write the doorstop later once you know what you're doing. Cozy mystery runs tighter, 70 to 80,000 words. It's a defined format with reader expectations built in. Young adult fiction typically runs 60 to 90,000 depending on the subgenre. Middle grade is shorter, usually 20 to 50,000. Romance is interesting because it's one of the few genres where shorter is genuinely acceptable. Category romance can be as short as 50,000 words. A standalone contemporary romance typically runs 70 to 100. So that's the landscape. Now, here's what to actually do with that. Don't use word count as a cage. Use it as a guideline. Pick a number appropriate for your genre and write it down. And use that to calibrate your planning. If you're aiming for 80,000 words and your story outline suggests you'll hit 40,000, you don't have enough story. If your outline suggests 180,000 words, you either have 2 books or you need to cut hard. So word count is a diagnostic tool and it tells you whether your story has the right scale and scope for what you're trying to write. What it doesn't tell you is how long each scene should be, when to start a chapter, or when to end one. Those decisions are made story by story. But knowing your target means you can pace yourself. You'll sense when you're burning too much word count on a scene that doesn't need it, or rushing through material that deserves more room. For a first novel, if you're not sure, aim for sort of 65 to 85,000 words. That's long enough to develop a full story, short enough to actually finish the story, and squarely in the range that works for both traditional publishers and self-publishing platforms. One more thing. If you finish your first draft at 68,000 words, that's fine. If you finish at 92,000, that's also fine. The target is a guide, not a finish line you have to cross at exactly the right moment. Revision will add words. Revision will cut words. And the final version doesn't have to match your planning number exactly. And now I've told you about hitting the right numbers for each genre, there's another way around you can approach this from. You can start with the story idea and get that worked out. Then you can write it to the length that the story needs it to be. If you avoid arbitrary inflation just to hit a word count, and you make sure all the details you need are included, then your story is complete at whatever length it comes out. At that point, you can then decide whether you have a novel, a trilogy, a novella, a short story, and you can take it to market accordingly. In the modern world of self-publishing, you have more leeway over that than you would if you try for the traditional publishing route. If you want a clear framework for planning and writing your first novel, including how to structure your story across a realistic word count, the course link is in the description. It covers everything from initial idea through to publishing, built specifically for people writing their first book.